It's a pleasant good morning to our viewers. Today being the 30th of April 2019, we say there's a last day for the month of April, as tomorrow will be the first. Welcome to Star Television. We broadcast live from our Media One Center, 3 Member Street, Brookfield in Freetown. My name is Abdul Rahman Kamara. Top stories in the program. The management of Bolori on Thursday, 25th April 2019, was updated head of radio and television stations manager on some of their activities since the expansion of the Freetown terminal. Budget Advocacy Network Bank concludes stakeholders meeting in Pujong to continue with the implementation of the Health Legacy Project supported by Christian Aid Sierra Leone. The aim is for people to be aware about the budget allocation on health in their respective councils. And the philanthropist and president of the Timne Community Development Organization, Al-Haji Mohammed Isa Katko Kamara, has held a Solidarity Peace Mission meeting with Muslims and other residents of the Waterloo community. All these, including sport, will be part of the program. We recall that the Sierra Leone Minerals and Geodata policy was recently approved in Cabinet. With those policies approved, the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources will now move up to really making transparency and accountability a matter of certainty. Joining me in the studio is the Mineral and Policy Advisor in the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources, Daniel Bundu. Good morning, welcome to the program.
Good morning, I'm happy to be here.
Also here is a Program Manager, Budget Advocacy Network, Abdul Rahman Sasay. I don't know how I feel having seen this.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to be here.
He will be talking to me on the importance of their stakeholder engagement with community people. Mr. Sisi, good morning.
Good morning.
You can be part of the program by sending us messages on the number 088-103-500 or commenting below our Facebook Live video. The Star Good Morning Show is probably sponsored by Rocket Commercial Bank.
Did you say you want to talk to me?
Yes, my brother. I get stress, bank stress.
Can you give me right?
So go put money in my bank, no problem. So go put money in my bank, no problem. I go to map in a line all day just for put money and pull money. And the loan system, look me business, they go down the drain. We not get loan system. Me, I just tired.
Now that's the stress you.
Yes, my brother. Now me stress standing.
Let that not be the stress. Because me your bank was the bank when I will tell commercial bank. When are the award-winning bank for 2018, where they don't win so many awards inside Freetown and even self outside Salon. Yes, they even recognize them at the international world as they win one of the most prestigious awards from Nigeria as the best corporate bank na Salon. They don't even count financial inclusion, where it means they want to involve everybody in a Salon. Never mind the kind of business way they do. If na pepper self they sell na market or any other petty business they do, then even self they don't left their comfort zone for going to bonds. When at the island, where you don't say when people that avoid for the banking business, they don't go there for let the people themselves they part of the financial inclusion within the part. And self they get plenty other products where you will meet you day-to-day needs. Then gets like the Keke account. When for them boys and when they ride the Keke them. And self then gets the Osusu account. Then get MasterCard, other platform that they will take money like SimCopo. When a new banking system where they don't count, the business now inside your phone they do. You know, you don't need for go, you need to snap that long queue. As then at the award-winning bank, they want to maintain that standard and they want to satisfy the customers. Let them make sure say everybody can inside the bank system. Let nobody not left out. Now for can open account to them, it's simple. You 50,000, 100,000, you're okay.
Thank you, my brother. I need for one go now girl commercial bank right now. I be low drink so that they this is good news.
Get commercial bank, mama. Get commercial bank with Rocket. Commercial bank number one. Bank with Rocket. Commercial bank number one.
Welcome back from that commercial break. We move along with the program. Heads of radio and television stations on Thursday, 25th April 2019, met with the management of Bolori to actually update them on their activities since the expansion of the Freetown terminal. Here is a highlight of that report.
To celebrate on 2022 200 years. Worldwide, we are represented in 104 countries. In Africa, in 45 countries. Annual investments that we are doing around Africa is average of 500 million a year. Bolore as a company is presented, as you could imagine, in many countries around the world, and the ports as well, in Europe, Asia, Central America, and Africa. Today we have as well two big investments ongoing. One is in Ghana and one is in Ivory Coast. That we are as well doing something similar as we did here, port projects, port expansions. That there is a difference between human being and being human. It's not the same. The reason why we have 99% almost of Sierra Leonean in our company. We have only few expatriates. Human resource manager, Madam Morgan, will explain you and answer into the details. Once when we are coming on the questions, whoever is around me will answer. You can be sure that I didn't call them this morning and prepare what to answer, what to not answer. This is not my style. So they are going to do as well part of the work that we need.
Then we have sea and land services. All these three entities, we have 402 members of staff representing them. We have, just for a breakdown, I have 319 for Freetown Terminal, where we are now, and we have 24 for SARS and 59 for ETL. If you do the math, you'll see that it's 402. And with the total, I want to take you back to 2018 because we just started the year, then there's very little to report in. So last year, the total staff, permanent staff, members of staff that were hired were 31 members of staff. The non-permanent were 25. Non-permanent is either temporary or fixed contract or just a short contract as well. We have 17 people that left the company through dismissal, termination, retirement, and I mentioned the last time that our minimum wage is far above the required minimum wage of the government.
Activities in relation to our CSR spanning from 2017 to present 2019. Some of our activities include disaster response, for instance, Ebola and the mudslide and the flooding. Support to community cleaning services. You know, it is one of the flagship programs of His Excellency the President. So we provide tools and cleaning material, cleaning gears, stipends and foodstuffs to people who participate in the cleaning exercise. But we also support another flagship program, which is the free quality education, provide learning materials to schools, to communities, and we also offer scholarship to deserving students.
Well, let me once more welcome my studio guest, Daniel Bundo. He's a Mineral and Policy Advisor in the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources. Abdul Rahman Sase here is the Program Manager for Budget Advocacy Network Bank. Gentlemen, once more welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Daniel, we recall at the Beneficial Ownership Conference in Dakar, Senegal recently, His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio reiterated his commitment that the exploitation of the country's extractive wealth will be guided by principles of transparency and accountability. And this commitment, to a larger extent, according to the Minister of Mines, Professor Mandie, has seen the approval by Cabinet on the mineral policy, especially mineral mining policy and the geodata policy, which those policies approve. I think the ministry now has a responsibility to ensure transparency and accountability, somewhat of certainty. how is the ministry deep into enhancing the reality behind the commitment of His Excellency?
The beneficial ownership discussion actually ties with our obligation under the EITI that we must, by January 2020, have mandatory or legal provisions for beneficial ownership disclosure by large-scale mining operators in this country. His Excellency President Bio did commit himself and our country that Sierra Leone will meet that deadline, and we are far advanced in ensuring that that happens. You just mentioned that Cabinet has approved the minerals policy, the Sierra Leone minerals policy, which is a very comprehensive policy, and in that policy document it gives guidelines or guide as to how we will implement the beneficial ownership disclosure requirement, and that would be done through the review of the Mines and Minerals Act of 2009, which we will soon commence. We are going to review the Mines and Minerals Act based on that policy, and definitely we are going to have legal provisions in that law, the new law that we are going to have, that will mandate companies in the extractive sector to disclose their beneficial owners. And let's talk about beneficial ownership 1 minute for our viewers who would like to understand what beneficial ownership is. You know, in registration of companies, you have people who come and register their companies, and you have names of these people, so you know who the legal owners are. So like if I came to the Corporate Affairs Commission to register my company as Daniel Bondo, I come and register my company as Daniel Bondo. But there are shareholders in my company who are actually controlling the operations of the company. Their names are not disclosed at all. So that is where the opacity in the sector is. We now want to know who these people are. Though their names are not on legal documents in our country, but they are making huge investments and also getting benefits from the sector. So what EITI is saying, we need to know those people who are behind what we call in law the behind the veil, who are supporting these operations, so that government makes or does business with credible people. So we know who we are doing business with. We know who the people are that are investing in our country. So we have what we call in law legal owners. You have what we call beneficial owners. So basically, the beneficial owner's name might not be on the instrument or on the documents that are registered in your country, but they are benefiting from the proceeds. So when you make profit, these profits or dividends are distributed to these guys. And these guys make decisions in their board meetings about the operations of a mining company in Sierra Leone.
Why the force for them to be actually known?
They have to be known because A, we want to make sure that we don't deal with rogue elements in our extractive sector.
On the aspect of money laundering and financing.
Absolutely, that is one part of it. That is one part of it. But also we want to have people who are credible, people whose operations support national development strategy of Sierra Leone. We don't want our country to be used as a conduit for terrorism. We don't want our country to be used as a conduit for money laundering and financial crimes. So, which is at the core of beneficial ownership disclosure.
Daniel, I'm pretty much aware that the policy covers the management of all mineral rights in the country and includes activity throughout the minerals, but the policy to a large extent does not cover oil and gas sector, quarrying and water resources. Why were those elements left out?
Absolutely. Mining is a completely different animal from the oil and gas sector. And you know, we have the Petroleum Directorate. They have their own legal instruments that guide their work. We have the petroleum law. They have their own policies. We don't want to bring oil and gas and mining into the same regime. That wouldn't work because the operations of the mining sector is completely different. The vulnerabilities that communities face in the oil and gas sector, once we develop our oil and gas sector, will be completely different from the vulnerabilities which mining communities
Could this be too much on the side of the ministry as a way of providing oversight?
No, well, you know, the oil and gas sector is not under our purview. It's not under the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources. As it is now, it's under the presidency. There is a Petroleum Directorate. So the Minister of Mines does not supervise the oil and gas, the Petroleum Directorate in Sierra Leone. Our mandate is to regulate the mining sector.
So how will this new approved documents and cabinets will aid the process of transparency and accountability generally for the operational activities of companies?
First of all, in addition to the beneficial ownership issue that we discussed, there are other provisions about transparency. We want to ensure that licensing processes are transparent and harmonized, so that, and there's predictability in there. We want to ensure that mineral rights agreements that we sign with mining companies get a good deal for Sierra Leone, get a good deal for mining companies. We want to optimize the benefits that we can get from the mining sector. So people are aware. So we also want to ensure that consultative processes are not just about ticking the boxes, but we have criteria that mining companies and other stakeholders in the extractive sector follow. So when we're talking about stakeholder consultations, it's real stakeholder consultations where the views of our communities, the views of people who are directly impacted by mining operations are captured, and not only captured, but also taken into considerations and put into either the business model of the mining company or into policy, which is why in the development of this policy, we held extensive consultations across the country in all major mining communities. We held consultations in Freetown, and even in the review of the mining law, we are going to do the same, so that people will understand what we are doing, the reforms we are doing in the mining sector, and also the benefits that we stand to get as a country, the benefit we stand to get as a people, mining communities, for example, and the benefit that investors themselves will get, because people come to invest in this country for profit making. But whilst we want to create the conditions for them to make profit, we also want to ensure that we get the best deal that we can get from our mines.
Is this comprehensive document predicated upon the vision of the African mining vision adopted by African Head of State in 2009?
Absolutely, and I'm very proud to state that Sierra Leone is at the forefront of domesticating the African mining vision. Actually, our country is the first country that has gone as far as developing a policy that is strictly in line with the African mining vision, and we are using this in developing our new, in the review of our mining law. And it is important that we align with the African mining vision, because we want to depart from this enclave nature of mining operations to a comprehensive and integrated approach where we deal with linkages, upward linkages, downward linkages, side stream linkages, and value addition as well, economic diversification. And we want to move away from the question of just extracting the raw materials and shipping abroad. We want to explore possibilities of processing in this country, developing the diamond cutting and polishing industry, for example, developing jewelry industry. Sierra Leone has gold, we have diamonds. So basically we have the basic materials that we need for a jewelry industry. So that is what this policy speaks to. It talks about how we can ensure that the mining sector supports the development of other sectors of the economy, be it agriculture, be it infrastructural development. It also speaks to when we are thinking about energy development, how can we provide energy for mining operations? When we're talking about road infrastructure, how can we enable the mining sector to reduce its operational cost and improve on its profits margin?
Okay, stay with me in the studio. He's Daniel Bondo. He's a mineral and policy advisor in the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources. Abdul Rahman Sase is a program manager for Budget Advocacy Network. He's here to talk to me on an engagement held with community people in Pujahun on the continued legacy of the free healthcare.
Yes, thank you very much, Abraman, for having me. We conducted a health accountability forum with stakeholders in Pujahun that included authorities of the district council, paramount chiefs, sector heads in the Pujahun district. And the reason behind this is because we are supporting them under a project that you rightly mentioned, the Health Legacy Project, which is a 3-year project that is supported by Christian Aid, which focus is to see an increased allocation and spending in the health sector for Pujahun district. And this we have started 1 year ago, and we are now in the 2nd year. So what we did was to conduct a PVCA, which is a big terminology. It's a tool that we call Participatory Vulnerability Capacity Assessment. That is a tool that we introduced in the development world by the Irish Aid, in addition, or to support what normally people call needs assessment in communities. But the difference with this tool is that it provides an opportunity for community people to participate. Be you a poor person, a rich person, a community stakeholder, authority, whoever will participate in the process in order for you to be able to identify your vulnerabilities within the communities. But what is unique about the tool also is to help community people to also identify their capacities. Because whatever vulnerabilities you might be exposed to as a community or a country, you also have capacities. But sometimes people take upon what we call inferiority complex to just think that they don't have the capacity to be able to handle vulnerability issues. So that is what the tool does. And at the end of the day, you do an assessment as to what you have within your community and what you don't have, and how you'll be able to harness those things that you don't have to be able to, implement whatever development agenda.
How did BAN really come to influence the budget hearing as an onward drive in advocating for more allocation of resources in the health sector?
Well, of course, BAN, as the name implies, our niche is on budget work. And we are working on 3 principles around the budget. So I was even listening to my brother, I was talking keenly around the beneficial ownership, right? Because we are also part of the AITI initiative from the perspective of budget transparency, accountability, and participation. That is the 3 principles that we work around the budget. So we have been in budget advocacy for years now, and as a result, we influence budget discussions, implementation, and monitoring from national level up to local level. But what we have noticed throughout these years is that there is a disconnect. If we continue to work on budget issues just at national level, the local level, right, the local council might also be challenged, and we have already started seeing those challenges. If you look at the transfer that are going to councils, for example, the budget allocation for the Pujon district, I want to be specific, for 2019 is 8 billion, right, which is approved by the Ministry of Finance. And 33% of that budget is going for the health sector in Pujon. You might think that 33% is 2.6 billion, which is also very small. Pujon alone is having up to 87 PHUs, besides the primary and the secondary health, which is in Pujon district. So if you look at that amount, it might not be enough, even just to procure drugs. They are having a lot of, MCH aid who are not approved. They are working at those PHU levels. We have been to those communities. Most of the PHUs have not got delivery beds, no delivery kits. So the essence of the project is to look at how we can also support the local council to be able to increase on their own source revenue generation.
Through sharing the experience.
Exactly, of the national level. We're also working with national governments in terms of providing alternatives. The reports we have been doing, the research we have been doing around revenue generation, as you rightly talk about even the issue of making transparency and accountability in the mining sector. We did a report that informed government, for which we are also working and supporting government to develop the first transfer pricing law in this country, for which we did a research around transfer pricing, which shows that this country is losing up to $240 million annually on just transfer and mispricing, right? And these are all centered around these big companies, their transactions that they do in the country. So we are transferring those skills at the local level so that local councils can be able to generate enough revenue to be able to add value to that aspect of whatever central government is sending to them. Because 8 billion, you might think it's big money, but that is small money to be able to provide services for local people in Pujon.
You may want to say perhaps you are pretty much constrained as a result of resources that you just piloting this in Pujon districts. Are you of the intention to actually spread it out, moving to other councils?
Well, as God may have it, out of the good work we are doing, definitely we are getting a good dividend out of it. We are also part of a project that is being led by Chat for Common Ground, which we are supporting councils in 5 districts to do what we call gender budgeting analysis, because we want to focus how councils are making decisions around distributing the resources that they have to affect boys, girls, male, female, the vulnerable, the disabled, in all of those localities. So our work around budget is diversified. It's not just centered around increasing the allocation on health, but also exposing all of this council into things that will help them to be able to generate the resources and use them judiciously for the benefit of the people.
Mr. Says, how big a challenge in a situation where the government, well, let me say this slowly, is reluctant, if you choose to, that may not impact the growth and development in the entire health sector? How big could that be a challenge?
Well, it could be because it will come as a result of government not having the adequate resources in the first place.
That could be the justification.
Exactly. And that's why, as we push for government to open up the process in allocating the resources and also spending them for the people, we're also working with government to be able to support the process of government generating the required revenue, for which we want to say that we are also following even central government, because if you see out in the 2019 budget, we have got a 10% allocation to health, right? Which is as a result of the commitment of the present government to be able to address to the international commitment for which the government, this country, have committed itself. So notwithstanding that, we are also following. You remember when the president was campaigning, he made a promise for which a lot of people I know voted for him as a result of that commitment. He said he wanted to increase revenue generation, right, to 20% GDP by 2023, which is a big commitment, right? And if he's able to do that, we are pretty sure that he'll be able to address all the problems of Sierra Leoneans.
Well, how as an organization, do you caution the match between revenue generation and expenditure?
Well, that is what we are doing now. Because of that commitment, we are following government as I speak. We started receiving resources from ActionAid last year in 2018 to follow that commitment of the president, because for us it is very, very important for a country to be able to generate its own resources to spend for its people. So we started following that process. We published a report in June to track that commitment of the president. In that first report, the result does not show much progress as to the revenue generation. And we captioned that report to say, if the trend continue like this, we are not sure if the president is going to be able to meet that commitment. But also we got funding from ActionAid for another quarter. We track from July, August, September. And that report shows that the government is doing well, right? For the first time in the history of this country, this present government was able to generate over 400 billion for a month, right, within that quarter. And when we published that, everybody was happy to be able to see that report. But what is missing now, as he rightly said, is the aspect of using the resources for the benefit of Sierra Leoneans. Let me tell you one thing that we have got, which is very good for this country. We have won, together with Christian Aid, a grant from DFID, which is for 1 year. And I'm sure if we do well, the project is going to be extended for 5 years. It's a government and civil society project. They are funding government directly to also support revenue generation issues. But in between the project, they are also supporting civil society to monitor. And that project is being won by Christian Aid, and we are the ones that are looking at the public financial management aspect. It's a €1 million project, and we are going to continue the aspect of monitoring this commitment, because for us as BAN, we want to see how our country will be able to generate the required resources so that it could be spent for the desired benefit of Sierra Leoneans to change the status quo.
Okay, in addition to these, we're looking at the mineral sector, for which the government is keenly expecting much more revenue coming in. Sierra Leone's mineral dependent economy therefore needs to make a better leverage of what should be the comparative mineral sector advantage for transformation and diversification. How is this element captured in the new document that has just been approved? Otherwise, we still resort to what many could refer to as resource costs.
No, yes, absolutely. What the new policy does is to show how government is going to increase revenue, and also how government will invest, right, in productive causes instead of unhelpful consumption. What do we mean by that? One, we have the Public Financial Management Act, and the regulations are there now. The Act talks about the establishment of 3 accounts. Yeah, the Transformational Development Account, the Stabilization Fund account, and the Intergenerational account. These accounts, there will be a formula where all revenues from the mining sector will go into these accounts. First, there will be a threshold. Once the threshold is hit for the transformational development, it goes into the stabilization fund, and then it goes into the intergenerational fund. And there are fiscal rules that would be used for the utilization of those funds. So the policy is saying, and what we are looking at, is that government will not use mining revenues for recurrent expenditures. For example, the payment of salaries, the purchase of vehicles, the purchase of fuel, stationery, etc. It will be deployed on transformational development projects. For example, health infrastructure, as my brother was saying, roads infrastructure, electricity infrastructure. But Mr. Sise mentioned something that is really very critical, and which is critical for us, and that is another issue that this policy deals with. The question of local councils raising own source revenues. What has happened in the past is, in the negotiation of our mining contracts, we have clauses or provisions in those contracts that undermine the capacity of local councils of mining communities to generate own source revenues. For example, mining companies were exempt from paying property tax. And the property taxes are paid to local councils. When you have legal provisions in your mining agreement that
who determined the waiver?
The honest truth is the government of Sierra Leone, the previous administration. We did that. Right, the previous administration did that because those mining agreements were signed under the previous administration.
Well, was it on the consideration of luring more investors?
And that is the point. The argument would be, let us reduce the investment capital so that will increase the profit margin of the mining company. But it has shown that it does not work. It does not work because the mining companies, right, will not go away just because you ask them to pay property tax to the local councils. Right. So the best practice, which this policy says, we are not saying we do not give waivers, but if you're giving waivers, you have to have consideration for the capacity of local councils to be able to raise own source revenues in ways that will help them augment the already budget deficit that they almost always have. So, for example, the Kwaidu District Council, City Council, the Tonkolili District Council, the Port Loko District Council, etc., should be able to have other ways of getting money to be able to pay for these issues that Mr. Sisi was talking about. But over and above all, we have to understand that the vulnerabilities which mining communities face are different from those where there are no mining operation. For example, when Kwaidu Holdings was doing their operations, there was blasting going on, houses were cracked, there was disturbances to kids in school. So there has to be ways where we will protect these people. So what this policy is saying, first of all, the Extractive Industries Revenue Act says the fiscal rule is our fiscal laws apply. However, the policy makes room for instances where if government thinks it makes economic sense to give waivers, those waivers can only be considered in tandem with the broad national development strategy of our country. That is the new thing.
I honestly don't want to make any misleading citation. Let me just reference with the document I have in front of me, which shows a multiplier effect where minimal primary gains were largely captured through payments to government in the form of royalties and taxes, while border impacts were primarily confined to mining areas where exploitation was taking place. In fact, the mineral sector has limited influence on the transformation or diversification of the economy. Instead, the recent fall in the global mineral price has exposed the vulnerability of Sierra Leone's mineral-dependent economic growth and resulted in severe economic recession.
Absolutely. So that is exactly what I was explaining in very many words here. Now, the Public Financial Management Act addresses this problem.
Okay.
We've stated, we understand that our country is mineral dependent. Yeah. So the fluctuations in the international market will definitely hit our budget. In 2012-2014, when the mining sector, the prices international community for commodity prices international market was high, our production increased to 23%. Mr. Cisse is aware of that, right? Money was flowing, and then come the Ebola boom, the Ebola shock, and then there was a downward trend in the commodity prices in the international market. Then our income, our revenues dipped, and when your revenues dip, then this is the impact on the budget question. Government budget is about is futuristic. It's aspirational, that this is what we want to spend, but it's also contingent on how much government can raise, which is why in many cases the budget that is approved is different from the monies that are really disbursed. So the 3 billion he talked about, probably at the end of the day, Pujon District Council will not go up to 3 billion. In many cases, it will be probably 1.5 billion or 1.2 billion. That is if government cannot generate sufficient income. So what this policy does here, and what complementary acts have done, like the Public Financial Management Act, the Extractive Industries Revenue Act has done, is to guide how we manage our revenues in ways that will be able to smooth expenditure. That is smoothing. We call that in economics here, smoothing, revenue smoothing, yeah? Where you make sure that you don't spend all the money that you make during resource boom to the point that you don't have money when the price dip. So you make sure that even if you generate increased revenue, you smooth your expenditure in ways that you save. So that if there is a hit in the international market for commodities, you are able to still maintain whatever transformational development project you may have commenced. And that is what this policy is doing, and that is what the new law, mining law, will do to complement the other laws that have been made already.
Again, is this new document pretty much comprehensive to address or rather eliminate all of the seeming challenges we've been faced as a government?
I wouldn't use the word eliminate. I would say it will help to address some of the challenges, because let us understand that in the mining sector, what we do is not entirely, or what is supposed to happen does not entirely rest on us as a mining, the regulator of the mining sector. There are tons of other agencies whose work impact on the work that we do. Land, for example. Ministry of Agriculture, for example. Ministry of Infrastructure, for example. The EPA, for example. Ministry of Energy, for example. If you ask the Ministry of Mines, what we would like to see is for our energy policies to ensure that we generate sufficient energy to be able to provide or meet the energy needs of mining companies who have the money to pay government for what energy we give them, which we can then use to subsidize energy for communities living in these mining communities. And also, that will help the growth of small and medium enterprises. But that we are not doing right now, which is why mining companies are generating their own energy. We are losing out on that. We want to ensure that our infrastructure development projects meet the infrastructure needs, roads infrastructure needs of mining companies, and not to depend on mining companies to do our own roads. One thing government does not want to do is to cede its obligation to mining companies. What we want to do is for government to take charge of its own development narrative and get mining companies to feed into that. So when a mining operation ends, the lives of people in those communities do not come to an end, but it continues, and then we are able to diversify our economy. The question of resource cost does not occur at all.
Two things. I recall a situation where no less an organization, BAN, came out with a report that Sierra Leone seemed to be losing much as a result of the waiver that's granted to those multinational corporations. And the indication now is that there seems to be a predictable environment where multinational corporations will come and say we want to do business here because of the certainty of the rules and regulations. But again, there seems to be a challenge. There had been a kind of blood relation on government institution. When we look at the NMA, the National Mineral Agency, the work of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, there had been a confrontation as to who has the statutory competence to actually determine the implementation of a specific content of the law. Should I give you an example? Yes. The AMR Gold in Kamakwe, right? Their operations were sealed off. Even when they got the right by the NMA to actually carry out the activities. But NMA is saying, you fail to actually do A to Z. Therefore, we have the competent authority. We are the competent authority to actually implement all of this. The question is, does this document actually address all of those issues?
It does. You know, as I mentioned earlier, what we do, or the mining sector, is not only regulated by us. There are other agencies. And you've given a critical example here, the question of environmental management. The EPA, of course, has primary responsibility for environmental regulation in the country. However,
there are limitations.
However, our laws also give us environmental responsibilities as well, but in tandem with the Environmental Protection Agency law. So what should happen is for the Ministry of Mines and the EPA to work together. But then there has been some breakdown in communications. So what this policy does is to create an inter-MDA committee for minerals development, where ministers of all agencies that are relevant to the mining sector would meet at least twice a year to discuss emerging issues in the sector. And not only ministers, to have the executive director, for example, of the EPA, the executive director for the National Minerals Agency, the NPAA executive director, the NRA for fiscal matters, to meet in one room to discuss emerging issues, for example, like the question of EIA license. Look, let us understand that in as much as we have to mine, inherent in our mining operation is disturbance of the environment. So sustainability question comes in there. As a mining ministry, we want to generate revenues for government. The EPA will tell you, yes, you have to generate revenues, but you have to do it within the framework of environmental protection. So there might be seeming conflict there. So what we want to do is create the forum. What this policy does is create the forum where there will be healthy dialogue among heads of these institutions, so the EPA knows what we're doing and we know what they're doing, and to also harmonize our laws. Now, if you look at the Mines and Minerals Act and you look at the EPA Act, the NMA Act, and other acts, there are seeming inconsistencies and conflict there. So, in the review of the Mines and Minerals Act, which we are going to review now, we are going to capture all of those, and this inter-MDA forum that I talked about will serve as a forum to help other agencies in the review of their own laws to be sensitive to the needs of the mining sector and also address some of the concerns that we have. And that feeds also into the question of the budget. Remember, I told you about diversification. What we want to do is place the mining sector at the heart of economic growth and transformational development. And to do that, we have to ensure that we create the conditions in which we support the Ministry of Finance to get the money that they need for development, to support the health sector, to support local councils to pay for all the devolved functions which they have. And one thing that is also critical, he knows that probably better than I do. The point is, districts or councils where mining operations exist are presumed to have increased capacity for own source revenue. So in the allocation,
but this is not the case.
No, wait. It's not definitely the case, because we have, right, instruments that also undermine this capacity to raise own source revenue. But in the distribution of tide grants or monies to these councils, that is taken into consideration. Where, for example, Kwenaduga District Council may have more money from government as government revenues to them than Kono District Council. The presumption is, or the assumption is, Kono District Council has increased capacity to raise home source revenues because of mining operations. But when you have instruments that undermine that, for example, like in our mineral license agreement, then that is a little bit discomforting. So this policy addresses that as well and helps. And another thing I want to touch on is our revenue stream. How do we pay for community development through the CDA agreement, the Community Development Agreement, where companies pay minimum of 0.01% of the revenues or to the host communities where these mining operations are. So these are all mechanisms which we've developed to ensure that mining revenues pay for development of in our mining communities, and also our eyes are on the sustainable development goals. How does the mining sector ensure that we contribute to sustainable development goals? So going into the future, what we'll be doing in our monitoring framework is to make sure that all payments from the mining sector, for example, through the DACDF, Diamond Area Community Development Fund, through the CDA, for example, through contracting that are directly related to the mining sector, we capture all of those figures And at the end of the day, we are able to show Sierra Leoneans that this is our contribution to community development in Sierra Leone.
I hope it also took into consideration their obligation to land reclaim.
Land reclamation. Yeah. That is the pet project.
I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Let me come to Mr. Sase.
Okay.
Mr. Sase, Ban, where else do you concentrate your endeavor to actually see there isn't a kind of mismatch, one in the government's revenue generation and spending, what they normally tag as prudent financial spending, and also ensure that what is being allocated meets the required councils for their operational activities?
Thank you very much. This is what is drawing our interest to building the capacity of community people to understand budget processes, because it's critical that people understand that no government has got money on its own. No government. They depend on the taxes they collect from people, businesses, and wherever. That is where they get their money. So we want, as we say, the three principles that we operate in the budget process is transparency, accountability, and participation. We want citizens to be fully involved. And this is where we always ask the questions. Whatever government processes that are being undertaken, what is the level of participation of the citizens? Even with all of these beautiful laws, you listen to what our brother is talking about, issues around mining, and these are all affecting local people. If you go to those communities, because we are also working in Kono, we are working in Tonkolili, you check the level of participation and consultation with these people, they will tell you that much is not being taken to them, right? And this is where we have the problem. Look at an example. The Pujong, for example, because I'm here to talk about Pujong issues.
Yeah.
Pujong Council is to generate enough revenue, right, to be able to add up to whatever government is giving to them. In their 2019 budget, you're surprised what they say they are going to collect as own source revenue is 1.2 billion. Added to what government is going to give them 8 billion. If government is able to transfer all of that. In this 1.2 billion, will be surprised, Mr. Brahman, to note that they have budgeted, they have estimated for 23.8 million on local tax. If you divide 23.8 million by 5,000, that is about 4,700 indigents in Pujong that are expected to pay taxes. Check the the local tax paying population in Pujong by the census report is more than this figure that has been given here. It's almost 8,000 some hundreds. So you see, these are the questions, but if the people don't understand these issues of the figures that are being put in this budget, and you know budget information is also very complex. It's not everybody that will be interested to look at the budget. So what we have started doing moving forward is to simplify the budget. You know, governments have a commitment on the World Bank Support Project where they are doing the citizens' budget, right? And we have started cascading that aspect to local councils. And that's what we just did in this document. We did the budget, we simplified the budget in just these pictures. So whoever sees this will just understand, oh yes, government has allocated 302 million for diet for the hospital, for example, right? Because our local people don't understand figures. And no sooner they begin to see, these figures, they become more confused. So this is what we want to do. This will motivate them, right, to paying these taxes, the property rate, the local tax, the business license, the market dues, so that they will understand that they have an obligation to support their local government to be able to provide services for them. This is very, very difficult to do, actually, but we have taken the bold step as a budget institution to be able to add value to what government is doing. Because the support that is coming to government is for the national budget.
Okay, after Pujong, we are next.
We are, as I told you, we are currently working in Kono, we are working in Tonkolili, we are working in Kenema, we are working in Putloko, and we are working in Cambia under the project that is being supported by the Irish Aid, right? And the one that is also coming from DFID is going to be national. And that one is more to support citizens understanding the new PFM law, right? And also strengthen the capacity of both national and local government structures to be able to generate enough revenue. Because that is our own concern. If government is to deliver services, they must have the money. And as my brother rightly said, the proposal the estimate presented to Parliament for the 7 trillion, you get me? That money is not lying there. Government is expected to generate the resources to be able to finance all of the development aspirations they have committed themselves to. But some people will not understand it. They are just waiting that, oh, government needs to do the road for us. Government needs to do this school for us. But we also have a responsibility in the aspect of the principle of participation. Whenever, for example, in this project that we are doing, because I must talk about the evidence aspect of this project, we are doing a health project in Pujol, but we are also addressing issues around education. When we are using the PVC to consult with community people, they were telling us that even when government has committed itself to the free education, they are transferring subsidies to schools. They are transferring what is called PBF, performance-based financing, to schools. All of those monies for some communities like Vawa Unsoa, Pejewa, you go to these communities, the community and the school structure, which is called the SMC, does not know anything about the use of those resources. The head teachers, you will be surprised to note that they still take blank checks at this 21st century to help to city chairpersons and SMC chairmen to sign for them to withdraw those resources, and those resources are not reflective to the schools in those communities. This is serious. So what we are bent in doing now is to make sure that the citizens know that they have a responsibility to support government, to monitor their money, because the budget is their money. Because they are the ones that are paying both direct and the indirect taxes that are being spent by the national and local councils to be able to provide the services to them. So this is the challenge we are having. And you know, figures are not things that are familiar to people. You and I know when we are going to school, when you used to have the mathematics teacher coming to the class, everybody will be taking excuse. I want to go to the toilet. I want to go and use myself. And this is the problem we are having as a result of that now.
Well, I dare say there's a downside in the monitoring and evaluation process within the government chain of work. Otherwise, all of these things should not be seen to be giving challenges to the government.
But yes,
if you don't monitor the process, if you don't follow up to the latter,
definitely. But we also, Abraham, we have a responsibility as civil society, because that's what legitimizes our existence.
Okay.
What we did,
as non-state actors.
Exactly, what we did after getting this information, we did not only invited the health sector stakeholders, we also we had discussion with the council and agreed that we should invite the education sector. For example, the DD was there, and we were able to share this information with him. And so now he has taken action as somebody who is representing the Minister of Education in that district to be able to address some of these issues.
Okay, let me take you some few objective the policy on the mineral sector aim to achieve. One is talking of enhanced intergovernmental agency. You spoke lengthily on that.
Yeah.
Establish a viable geoscience database and data management system that will contribute to strengthen technical and commercial capacity of Sierra Leoneans.
Absolutely.
It's also promote improved revenue management with more equitable distribution of benefits and prudent investment of mineral revenues. And lastly, ensure that all investors in Sierra Leone mineral sector fully comply with EITI requirement and engage meaningfully in the selective process. And perhaps this last one seems to be very big challenge, especially for multinational companies.
No, but actually the exact opposite is the case. Mining companies are willing to cooperate and comply with EITI requirements. At least that is our experience so far. In our reporting, in getting information from mining companies, they've always provided the information that we need, and they are fully on board on even this beneficial ownership discussion that we are having. We're definitely going to continue to engage them through the Chamber of Mines when we are doing our review of the mining law, for them to know that come January 2020, they will be required to disclose their beneficial owners. Now, existing companies will have to do that, and any new company that invests in the sector will have to do that. Probably as this works and we see the benefits of this to us, both in our international standing as well as the status of people who are investing in our country, maybe other sectors would follow suit, like say for example the telecommunication sector, the port sector will follow suit to disclose their beneficial owners, because this is where money is. And if you have to improve your international standing, you have to bring in credible actors to invest in your country. You have to create the conditions that will support that. And again, going to, though you said you were going to come back to this land reclamation thing,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about that because
Quickly.
I just was going to say quickly that this is the pet project of the current Minister of Mines, Dr. Mori Manye. This is at his heartbeat. When he came to the ministry, he's very much concerned about community development and reducing the harsh realities of mining operations on communities. Now, and land reclamation is in our law, right? That miners, artisanal miners, small-scale miners must do land reclamation. But what has happened in the past is government has been collecting money for land reclamation. But the truth of the matter is, the amount of money they've collected from artisanal miners is outrageously small to repair the damage done by either artisanal miners or small-scale miners. In the case of large-scale operators, they have mine closure plans, and we have other mechanisms that will hold them accountable for. So we are not too worried about them because we have the structures already to hold them accountable for that. But for small-scale and artisanal miners,
Quickly,
it's really critical.
How does the aspect of relocation, resettlement of indigents is being captured?
And well, you see, resettlement is provided for in that law, right? At the moment, unfortunately, we do not have any resettlement policy, nor any resettlement law. So the practice has been, we've ceded.
Is the document comprehensive?
Absolutely, because it provides for resettlement. And we are currently working through the MCCU and the Ministry of Lands. I am part of the RTT that is working with international consultants to develop a new resettlement policy, right? And also a new resettlement law. So what this does is to create guidance for this new policy, resettlement policy, so that government will take leadership on resettlement matters and not cede it to mining operators. So which is why you will see the resettlement strategy for Koidu, for example, is different from the Iluka resettlement strategy.
Quickly, I will not come back to you. What in few seconds, what could be your closing remarks? With time seems to be getting.
It's that the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources under this current minister and this current administration has shown serious commitment to ensuring that we create the conditions for the optimization of benefits from the mining sector. And what we've not done in the past is to capture the full contribution of the mining sector to economic growth, which is why we are now going to ensure that all payment streams, both direct and indirect, that emerge from the mining sector will be fully captured, and Sierra Leoneans will see. You know, to address this question, we minerals, they're not the benefit winner in this country. That might not be entirely true. Koidu city as it is today would not have been the Koidu city today if it was not for the benefits of the diamond sector. That was one of the cities that was completely destroyed during the war. I flew over Koidu, I could not understand my own town. So what we are now doing is to ensure that every revenue stream that goes to community development or goes to development both at the national and local level is fully captured and reported, which is why we have a new website that we are developing to tell our own story. So we don't depend on other people to tell our story. So just my of course, there will be future conversation on this, but just to say that government is committed to optimize the benefits that we can get from the mining sector, but also within the sustainability framework. So environmental people will know that we just don't want to cut trees and dig the ground, but we are also responsible citizens.
Quickly, Mr. Zin.
Yeah, one of the message I want to leave is that we think budget work is very critical, and so we are continuing to build on the masses around people that we work with on budgets. Quite recently, we have set up a team of journalists to be able to report on budget issues, especially on audit issues, and so we'll continue to strengthen on that, because we think you guys are very critical in providing budget information to the people. And we also want to ask that government continue to open up the process of budget information.
I just say
Very, very important.
I just say my colleague Mohamed Kone is pretty much central. In
Yes, Kone, the Lamranas, we have them, you know, a team of them that and we are going to expand on that because we are also very sure of getting that similar support from Osiwa because they are very much keen on that and the open budget index survey. So we are going to strengthen all of you guys so that we work inclusively to make sure that the budget process in Sierra Leone is transparent, accountable, and participatory for the benefit of all Sierra Leoneans.
You guys seem to be attracted to more support. Maybe it's as a result of your credible work.
Thank you very much, definitely.
On this note, I want to thank both of you. But I must say this pretty much so publicly that I must extend an invitation to my program, Economic Forum. If you guys can utilize this particular program for the enlightenment of the lay public to understand issues surrounding the significance of personal documents so important like this, and your engagement with stakeholders or country on the need to sustain the legacy of free healthcare, that I'm sure you will do justice to the people of this country. Shall we?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to your cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sparing your time being part of this program. This is how I do that. We continue into this edition of the program. My guest in the studio is Daniel Bondo, lawyer Daniel Bondo. He's a mineral and policy advisor in the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources. And Abdul Rahman Sisse here is a program manager for BAN. Till then, the program returns tomorrow. My name is Abdul Rahman.